Here we have a front left tire, Pontiac Grand Am, that has been hit in a curb from the side. You can see here that where a piece broke off, and then the strut came down and gouged out the booty here and pulled the front axle out of the transmission, and there's some more booty damage here on the inner boot. Not sure what the story is on the power steering unit and the control arm here, but we'll find out as we take it apart. Prop the wheel up a little bit with a cinder block. The next step was to remove the 3 strut bolts that were here, here, and here. Then the strut fell on down through while somebody's holding it underneath, and there it is laying in the wheel well. We'll fish it out of there in just a minute. By the way, we're doing all this mechanicking in the snow here. It's about 29 degrees outside here. Here's the strut. There are the 3 bolts that we took off. I put the cinder block all the way under it to raise it up so we could reach the lug nuts. You use 3/4 inch to get off the plastic false lug nuts that have that hub cover, and then you go on to the real lug nuts underneath. We used a 3/4 inch socket on the lug nuts. They seemed a little loose. Then we tried 11/16, and it was too small, it didn't go over, so we ended up using a 19mm now to get the lug nuts off. On the caliper, which is right here, there were 2 bolts here and here that went into this point and this point. They were 1/2 inch sockets, and they came out pretty easy. Then we suspended the caliper up in the wheel well using some kind of like green coat hanger wire type stuff, and so there's no strain on this brake hose anymore, which luckily didn't snap in our situation. Next, we're going to unscrew this bolt, then there's another one on the other side to remove this piece here, and those bolts there are also 1/2 inch. The next step is to take the bottom nut off of the steering control arm. Then we're going to have to remove this piece from this piece using a special tool. We tapped on the bottom of this bolt here that's attached to the tie rod. This is the tie rod end, and it popped right out of that hole there. Now we're working on removing the cotter joint, the cotter pin right there that holds the steering knuckle to the lower ball joint, and that'll enable us finally to get the broken steering knuckle off. The bolt to the stabilizer bar, it's a 1/2 inch here. You need a 1/2 inch wrench down there to keep it from spinning. Take off the pieces one at a time, making sure you remember which order they go in. Again, it's important to keep the pieces in the right order with the right things on the top and the bottom. Next, we have to take off the 2 bolts that hold on the control arm. This is the control arm here. One of the bolts is there. One of the bolts is, that one is horizontal. This one here is vertical. That holds it back over here. The front control arm holding on the horizontal bolt holding on the control arm worked best with an 18mm. 11/16 didn't fit, and 3/4 was a little on the loose side. The back control bolt, we used 13/16. That worked best. So not sure why it seems to be half metric and half English, but that's what we ended up doing. This bolt just comes out without having to hold a nut on the other side. It probably goes right into the frame. Be careful that the control arm doesn't fall out on you after you take it out. We reattached the axle steering knuckle assembly to the tire to give us leverage. We put a bar through here to hold it. Then we're using a 1 7/16 inch socket. I think a 1 3/8 inch would work good too, and that's a 6-point. This has got a 3/4 inch drive. We already broke this, and we did it by putting this here and banging on this with a mallet, and eventually gave, and now we can get this thing off. When the curb was hit, here's the steering knuckle, and this is the piece that broke off. When it broke off, it rammed into here, ruining the CV booty and possibly CV joint, and then jerked this thing out of socket. This is all stretched out. I don't know all what's in here, but it won't go back in, so that's damaged. We decided that the control arm was bent and that the frame was not bent. Let me tell you how we did that. This is the lower ball joint that goes into the steering knuckle. These are the 2 points of the control arm that go into the frame, or actually on a Pontiac it's called a subframe because it's kind of a mini frame that's attached to the main frame of the car, and it goes under the engine compartment. But anyway, we measured from this point to various points on the body, such as the frame, the edge of the wheel wells, the edge of the car, the center of the car. Same thing on this one. Then we did it on the good side that didn't hit a curb, and the measurements were all the same. Then we measured from here to the front of the wheel well and back of the wheel well on both sides. Turns out the left one, this point here, was about an inch further back, a little less than an inch further back. So we thought, okay, well, sounds like the control arm is bent. So then we measured from this point to this point here, you know, laying under the car on our backs with a light and just simply a steel tape ruler, and measure the distance there, and the distance from here to here came out also just about an inch shorter, a little less than an inch shorter. So everything pointed to the frame being fine and the control arm being bent. We just put the new control arm in. You can see it down there, and now we're attaching the link between the control arm and the stabilizer bar. We had a steering knuckle that we ordered, and we took this hub nut down here and put the new axle with the 2 CV joints into the steering knuckle, then tightened the hub nut, which of course we put a lot of force on that. You want to tighten that quite a bit, all you can. Then we shoved it into the transmission back here, that end of the CV joint, and we rotated as we did it, and it went right in and locked so you couldn't pull it out. Then we got down here where the lower ball joint is. We put the casting nut in the lower ball joint, and then put in the cotter pin and bent the end of the cotter pin so it wouldn't come out, and so the castle nut would never spin. Next we put on the tie rod here and screw that bolt there by the hook. Then after that we put the rotor here back on. It just goes right over these studs. It turns out it's lug nuts that are holding on the rotor and nothing else on this vehicle. Then we're going to take the calipers and put them over the rotor, and they're going to go into those 2 bolts right there, that one and that one. We just put the calipers back on and inserted the disc pads in the calipers. They've fallen out. Put them over the rotor and tied in, you know, this bolt here, and there's another bolt down there. We're going to put the strut onto the steering knuckle, which is where you see those 2 bolts right there I'm focusing in on. That goes right there. Yeah, we're putting the tire on, lug nuts. We're going to take it for a test drive. Steering mechanism works, brakes work, everything checks out basically. We'll see how it goes when it drives, and then of course always get your alignment checked, an alignment chop before you drive the car very much.